I was using worthiness as if it was something we could or couldn't have, and my symptoms were a gauge of whether I was worthy or not, rather than like worthiness is not, it's not on a scale. Like we all born worthy and whole, and that whole complete piece is essentially what we're all being invited into in different ways. For some of us that's symptoms, other people it'll look different, but I certainly believe life is wanting to know that that's who we are. Like we are our essence at our core, and all these things are invitations if we're willing to reframe them.
Welcome to Openly Spoken, the podcast to help you show up, speak out, and be seen. I'm your host, Celia Antonio, women's empowerment mentor, mindfulness expert, and quantum self-love coach. Every week, you'll hear real and unfiltered stories from me and my guests covering topics around spirituality, self-expression, womanhood, healing, love, relationships, and more. My intention with this podcast is to help sensitive, spiritual, ambitious women fully step into their potential so that you can live a life you love with every cell and every fiber of your being. And I get that it's not easy to fit into a box, so I bring in a variety of topics to feed your multifaceted self. You can find me over on Instagram at self-expressbabe, and info on where to find my guests are always going to be in the show notes below. I am so grateful that you're here, and I invite you to now set an intention, sit back, relax, and receive what is coming through to you on your headphones right now. Take what resonates, leave out what doesn't, and give yourself time to reflect. Thank you so much for being here. Now let's dive in. Hello, welcome back to another episode of Openly Spoken, the podcast to help you show up, speak out, and be seen. Today's guest is Lara Rickard. She's an HCPC registered dietitian, intuitive force, powerful space holder, and the founder of Marula Wellness. Her soul's work is supporting some of the most magical women in the world to cultivate a trusting relationship with their body so that they can reverse their Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome, PCOS, symptoms with reverence. Lara has PCOS herself, and she's been on a whole journey with that, which you'll hear about in this episode. And this journey has basically led her to a place where she's been able to explore the connection between her physical, energetic, and emotional worlds. In this conversation, we're going to be talking about leading life with the truth of your body first. We're going to talk about worthiness. We're going to talk about functional medicine, nutrition, Western medicine. You'll also hear Lara's story from being a clinical dietitian in Zimbabwe, where she's from, and also her personal story with PCOS and how that really influenced her work and what she does now. You're also going to hear about how Lara is not on social media. She chose to come off of social media a few years ago. So you're going to hear about why she decided that and how she is still able to run her business and book out her clients without being on Instagram. The best place to find Lara then, since she's not on social media, is her website, which is in the show notes. But before you click that, let's have a conversation with Lara and let's dive right in. Well, thank you, Lara, for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. And let's start by you giving us an introduction to anyone who's listening about who you are and what you do.
Cool. So I am Lara, and Lara Rickard. And on paper, I'm a registered dietitian, specifically for women with polycystic ovarian syndrome. Taking more of a functional, holistic approach, so essentially going as far upstream as possible to understand what's causing symptoms in the first place so we can go about addressing them. How that's evolved over time, which I'm sure we'll get into. but I've moved from just purely doing food and lifestyle and testing and supplements into, alongside all of those things, the energetics and emotional elements as well, because they tend to be further upstream than just the tests and supplements. Yeah, that's essentially what I do for now. So I'll leave it at that and then see where we go from there.
And what was the like pivotal moment in your own life journey that led you to do this kind of work?
Cool. So I got my period when I was 13, and I had it for a handful of months. And then I'd been through quite a traumatic, well, I lost my dad a couple of years before. And that experience, that was just one of my first experiences of big grief. I was a child at the time. I was 11. And I just remember feeling, just deep grief of actually having lost someone. And then when I ended up having to go to boarding school, I'm from Zimbabwean. The political situation in the country at the time meant that I needed to leave the country in order to go to school. And I did that. And that experience of going to boarding school completely mirrored the experience of losing my dad, because I was essentially losing my mum and losing my home. I mean, they were still there, obviously, but what that had looked like and what my sense of safety was just changed completely. So I'd had my period for, as I say, like a handful of months, and then that happened.
And you got it like when you were away from home for the first time?
No, I was at home still at that point, but had it for a handful of months, and then I left because it was kind of just given, as I said, the political situation we needed to, and then I didn't get it again for more than a decade. And throughout that time, there was a little bit of concern when I was a teenager, but it was mostly, oh, don't worry, like, we'll just see what happens. We'll see. When you're the standard approach for most gynecologists at the time was, if you when you get to a certain age, we'll put you on the pill, and then when you want to have a baby, we'll give you some drugs for that. And there was nothing beyond that. So that was essentially my narrative. Alongside all of that, I got, so with PCOS, Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome, they are classic symptoms. So it's essentially a combination of symptoms that leads to a diagnosis. And I was presenting with quite a few of those, and one of them was excess hair started growing, where, face, chest, belly, when I was a teenager. That was alongside not having my period. And then in addition to that, I had extreme acne that just was getting worse and worse and worse, and not responding to any of the classic treatments. I was in such high stress, though, I don't think I would have had capacity at that point, and being a teenager, then to take on board any of the food and lifestyle elements. I was just in the place at that time, which has completely shifted now, but I was in a place of, I just need to get rid of these. I just need them to stop. And I was really kind of using them without being aware at the time of indicators of like whether I was worthy to exist in the world or not. And that was at quite a subconscious level. It took me a long time to recognize that was going on. So that was happening. And then I, at school, got exposed to nutrition, and just it just really excited me, because I was like, you just need, with like micronutrients, so like vitamins and minerals, if we just have a little bit of that missing or added in, like, what a pivotal difference, and what an amazing difference and potent difference it can make. So it just used to it did excite me a lot. And from there, I went on to study dietetics, not really recognizing at the time the clinical side and element of it. So how clinical it was that I would be, working in hospitals and with just quite extreme protocols and what have you. So I went on to university to study dietetics, and it was, the clinical dietitians were of higher esteem than the other types of dietetics. So basically what I'm doing now. So I tried to squish myself into that. Like I really enjoyed it. So that would be working in things like intensive care and surgery wards and like extreme burn wounds and that kind of stuff. And like, again, nutrition played such an amazing role in that. But I tried to squish myself into being that, even though it wasn't like truly what lit me up. Again, I was like falling into that. Okay, in order to be here and be worthy, this is what I need to lean into. So I had that at that point, still didn't have my period, kind of was on the pill here and there, but not much. And again, like the pills just at that point wasn't addressing so essentially with PCOS, you don't ovulate and the pill stops ovulation. So
that probably makes it worse.
Well, it can. It's I mean, like I also want to respect, obviously everyone has their own relationship with the pill, and so I don't want to cause judgment.
All our bodies are different.
And I have some clients who that's what they choose to use at that given time, and we work with that. So I'm not like, there's zero judgment towards the pill itself. They are, I just encourage anyone who does go down that route to really research and read into it, because it does have side effects for some people, and that can absolutely make things worse. Anyway, so I was there, and then moved from Zimbabwe to the UK. So I studied in South Africa, went back to Zimbabwe for a year, worked in hospitals there, came to the UK to work in hospitals here, and just was blown away, because having worked in Zimbabwe, it's very, very resource limited. We basically working with nothing to support patients in hospital. And then here, I was expecting it to be this wonderful gold standard, like, here's your beetroot juice and here's like for breakfast. And then that was not what it was at all. And it got to a point where, just the recommendations I was making, I was like, this doesn't make sense, and it doesn't feel like it's actually ultimately doing anything meaningful. And that's not to say, I mean, Western medicine absolutely has its place, and I'm so respectful and thankful for it when in certain instances, but in the way I was trying to support patients at the time, I was like, this doesn't feel aligned. So that kind of crossroads with where I was just looking even more deeply into my PCOS, and like, what can I do around this, and what can make a meaningful difference. And that's where I came across functional medicine. So that was essentially my pivotal moment of recognizing, okay, like how I live and what I eat really does make a significant difference. And if all these things come together, there can be that shifting in the needle. And that's what I initially went into, but then again, as time went on, so I got some improvement in my symptoms, but it was really after that, recognizing that actually being in relationship with my body, and coming from a place of really, really, really recognizing and having that respect and that reverence of like, our symptoms they're one of our body's ways of communicating with us. They aren't, if we allow them to be, they can be deeper invitations to coming back to our whole true fullest selves as human beings, rather than just how can we get rid of this as quickly as possible. And that's not just with Western medicine, that we often think, oh, that's just the Western medicine approach of how can we get rid of this as fast as possible. But I see it in the functional world too, of like, people wanting to take a upstream approach, but still really being in that fear-driven energy of make it stop, make it stop, make it stop.
Like something's wrong.
Something's wrong with me and I'm broken. And that's the, like, really seeing in those teenage, early 20s years of how yeah, that was the narrative I was really operating out of like, something's broken with me, and if I don't, or in me, and if I don't fix this, I can't exist in the world. I'm not worthy to be here. And so that pivotal time really came with, okay, even with symptoms, I can be in this trusting, nourishing, reverent relationship with my body, and I'm so worthy to exist in this world and bring my gifts, excuse me, in fullness to the world. Yeah.
And that narrative that you played as a child, growing up with your symptoms, is that what led to, like you said, when you were in school, you saw the clinical dietitians of like that they were like held to higher regard, and you felt like you needed to be like them too. Is that what led to that as well?
I think to some extent, for sure. I think there was this, just a narrative of, especially in the Western model, the Western medicine model of the science being the ultimate truth and the only answer. And the more I could squish myself into that, that's not to say I don't, like, I love research articles and I love knowing that we've got that as a tool, but recognizing that that's still only part of the picture. And that we, like, the more I tried to squish myself into the, like, there being one way or the only way, just really wasn't serving.
I've always had a problem with that too, that there's like one cure for a certain illness or something like that, because our bodies are not the exact same. And I don't know if your journey included learning about like Ayurveda with the different, like, what do they call it? Something with a C.
I can't remember right now, but the different.
there's Kapha, Vata, Pitta, and like the different, they call it something with a C, but I can't think of it right now.
I mean, I haven't, with Ayurveda, I haven't gone into it fully, but I know it's like the different elements essentially, isn't it?
And we all have like different levels of those elements. So like taking one pill for, I don't know, let's say there's a pill for chicken pox, which I know that doesn't exist, but just as an example, like someone who's like a kapha is going to react super different to someone who's like really strongly pitta, because like their internal body is just different. Like some of them have more fire, some of them have more like of that like mass and like mucus and that groundingness. So like we're all going to react differently. And I wonder too if like you felt like when you were in school for dietetics, if you felt that like the information being given to you was maybe a little bit outdated.
And I think it's again just the classic, again, like it does, because like when I was working intensive care units, so like it was such a completely different narrative or approach to, or norm, for most people, but that's when like people being fed through tubes in various ways. So again, like it's got its place, but it was the fact that I had PCOS and I didn't feel equipped, or like turning to food wasn't my first port of call, just underscores it seemed, well, my experience of it at the time was that it was more of that, it wasn't as preventative as what we're doing now, or not even as preventative. It didn't go as deep as it was very surface level in so many ways.
Like there wasn't that view yet that food is medicine.
Exactly. And even now with the whole food as medicine, I'm also so mindful of it with a lot of women who've journeyed in that way, the kind of guilt and shame narrative that can come within that, because they can then think, oh my God, if I have this ice cream, have I just undone 10 years of work? Or is having this little exposure to this sugar or whatever, or piece of like bit of gluten. So it's walking that whole line of like, knowing the power of food and the huge benefit of food, but again, not being dogmatic around that to a point where the blame and shame of eating a certain thing outdoes the stress of that, likely causes more or has more of an impact than just having the food itself.
Exactly. Like also like the state of mind and what you're feeling as you're eating it. Like I believe that you digest those emotions and thoughts as well with your food. So like I do have memories of like times where I've eaten like fast food, for example. And as I'm eating it, I'm like, my body is only choosing to absorb the nutrients in this food, if there are any. Like that's all my body's going to absorb, and everything else she's gonna let go of. But it's a hard like loop to come out of. I think maybe it's even harder like for us as women, because there's just years and years of society telling us how we need to be, what our bodies need to look like, and like eat this food, eat that food, stay away from fats, and like
just and it's not, you know, it's what we've been exposed to in our lifetime, and like the lineage element as well of like you know, dieting, especially in our parents' generation, and even somewhat with grandparents. So it is stepping out of that isn't just
it's hard.
It can be. And again, you know, all of this really comes back to, for me, like when we're making these choices, that's what I work and walk with clients through, is let's be in relationship with your body, and let that be the cornerstone of what drives the decisions that you make. Absolutely, I will guide with the science, I will guide with the intuition, I will guide with your story and what's available, but at the end of the day, it is being in that body relationship that's going to make those choices feel expansive and whole and nurturing, rather than that restrictive, fear-based starting points.
True, because that like restrictive, fear-based side of dieting isn't sustainable, first of all.
And it's coming from a place again of like, we're broken and we need to be fixed, and we've got to be a certain way in order to exist in this world. So it's all those things of and like, you know, being in a relationship with our body isn't just diving straight into that self-love. So like with PCOS and with a lot of hormonal conditions, or you know, any kind of condition that we're dealing with, ultimately often symptoms aren't pleasant, and they're not, you know, they can be debilitating for some people, and really just difficult. And being in relationship with our body isn't ignoring that. It's, you know, it's not bypassing that. It's not going from that place to just, okay, well, I need to think positively in order to get my period back, or in order to have clear skin, or in order to whatever, and I can only think good thoughts towards my body. It's not that bypassing. It's really like, okay, let's give space for the anger and the disgust and the disappointments that those symptoms can bring about. And from there, like, that's a truthful relationship, and that's a trusting relationship. If I see, like, if any human relationship where it's just rainbows and unicorns, I'm like, hold up, what's going on here? And it's the same with our bodies, is it's like really being in that space of, you know, knowing and trusting that our bodies, just as we might feel a certain way towards our bodies equally are like, you know, we've just been told to diet or do this or move more or eat less or whatever for our whole lives, and that's what you've been doing to us, and this is our way of communicating to you that it's not working. And essentially moving through that and giving space for those emotions and those feelings, so you can get to that place of reverence, respect, trust, and love of full self, love of, you know, it's not love of, I only love you body when you don't have symptoms. It's I love you exactly as you are in these different stages. But that in itself is such a journey to, you know, get to.
That's a powerful place to get to like Love your body exactly how it is right now. Exactly. Without
Yeah, and
changing
it's
anything, and just being holding space for however it is you're feeling and whatever's happening right now.
it is, and it's, it's still such a journey that I'm like, there's just levels and layers. And
Yeah.
at the beginning of the year, yes, time. At the moment, I'm like, what even is it?
I know
The
it's
beginning of
already
this year.
almost May. It's
I know, I
crazy.
know, I know. So in January, on the palm of my hand, I'd had eczema, psoriasis, some skin condition that doctors were kind of like, we don't know, going on, and it just flared like absolute crazy in December, to the point where I was like, it feels like it's stuffing dragons having battles on my hand. It was really not pleasant, and I could tell, like, every time I was eating, it would get worse, and that was kind of regardless of what I was eating. And I know, because of the work I do and whatever, that there are therapeutic diets, not long-term diets that I would look into, but there are therapeutic diets that you can use to dampen that. But I was so resistant to doing it. I was like, I don't want to do that right now. Like, me as Lara, I was like, I'm not up for this right now. But that's where the beauty of being in a relationship with my body was, because then I could say, okay, without being like, body, what's your, I need a 10-step answer in 2 minutes. I could just drop that question in of like, what's your best next step? What do you want? And just dropping that in daily and letting me arrive at, or letting our bodies arrive at a decision. And I got to, I think it was about 2 weeks later, when my body was like, yep, this is the diet that we're going to do for now. And because I'd been in that dance and in that dynamic, it wasn't then this like, oh my goodness me, how am I going to do this? This is the worst. It was really expansive and wholesome, and not like, it wasn't easy, but it was easeful. Like, I was in that place of like, okay, this, like, I feel like I can do it. And because I'd been in conversation with my body, I made it my own. So I was like, yes, this is the guidance that the structure is giving me, but I'm really coming back to, let's review this every week and let's just keep going from there and see what happens. So anyway, I did that, and then continued to be in conversation with my body of like, again, is this emotional, is it physical, is it spiritual, what's driving this further? So it was initially physical, as the food element, and then that, through addressing that gave space for me to then continue to be in that conversation and see there was also this emotional side and element to it. And that emotional side for me with that particular symptom was anger. And I was like, there's just like, I've been working with anger for quite a few years now, but there was more there. And then that gave space for me to see that. And again, so then I was like, cool, what are we going to do here? So dance it out, invite anger to dinner, like literally lay a space for anger at my dinner table with the flowers and the candles, and make anger feel welcomed. And then just keep going for, like, just keep working with it, and got, support therapy wise, as well, to just complete, like, let that metabolize. Where I don't know where that anger was. I can't pinpoint, like, oh, it was this event at this time on this day that brought this anger up, but it was there in my body. And now, for whatever reason, January was a time where it decided to come out. And all of that to say, like, I could have viewed that and been like, I just, like, let's get rid of it. And yes, I wanted it to stop, but I was really willing to go into the invitation underneath that, and again, still be willing to see, even with this hand that looked like, I don't even know what it looked like at the time. It did not look pleasant. being in the place where I could truly love, that's what my body, like that was guidance from my body. Again, another step to knowing my whole fullest truest self. And that was all of me. It wasn't like, okay, body, I'll love you when the symptom is gone. It was being in that place of, yeah. So it was just like a little story of that in lived reality of, yeah.
And that's like what you told me when we had a call before, little connection call. And you told me something about approaching holistic wellness from this like space of like, I'm already whole. How did you like, so for example, the story you gave now really illustrates that you're embodying that, because instead of being like, let's get rid of this, something's wrong, you were just like, body, what do you need? What do you want right now? What's your best next step? How did you get to that place of feeling whole?
Yeah, I think it was part of the journey of when I first started with the functional medicine root cause approach. I was doing all the food stuff. So I was like making all the changes to what I was eating, and I was making all the changes to how I was living. And I did that for, it wasn't like 2 seconds and then it was over. I did that for a significant period of time. But I was only getting so far in seeing, like, it was either like symptoms would shift, but it wouldn't be sustainable.
Okay.
And like doing the things just didn't feel wholesome. It just kind of felt like that noise. And then it was through that I just started getting more and more curious of like, okay, like those things are so powerful and so important. And for some of my clients, it's all they need. But for a majority, there's another side of it. And that for me was also what was going on, was doing that. I was missing a piece or pieces of allowing things to shift further. And that's where the energetic and emotional elements came in. And that's where I just started recognizing, okay, like what's actually underneath this, and what does this mean to me? Because there's a lot of like metaphysical stuff you can read into of like what different symptoms mean to different people, and or like what different symptoms mean according to whoever. But I really just sat with it, and I was like, what is actually true here? What's truly going on for me? And I just, like, in conversation with the universe and life and God, myself, whatever, recognize that there was this, like, I was using worthiness as if it was something we could or couldn't have, and my symptoms were a gauge of whether I was worthy or not. Rather than, like, worthiness is not, it's not on a scale. Like, we all born worthy and whole, and yeah. So I think it was in the exploring of the emotional energetic side and seeing what a difference that made together with the other things that I was doing, that I just recognized that whole complete piece is essentially what we all being invited into in different ways. For some of us, that's symptoms. Other people, it'll look different. But I certainly believe life is wanting to know that that's who we are. Like, we are our essence at our core. And all these things are invitations if we're willing to reframe them. So that's not, a disclaimer here. That's not to say that we don't live in a world that's got systems in place that are unjust and oppressive. So I'm not undermining any of those, and recognizing those all are at play. But certainly outside of, or not even outside of that, even within that, like the agency that we still do have, if we're willing to look at, willing to reframe that things aren't happening to us, they are truly happening for us in the least cliche way possible to say that.
So it sounds like you moved away from just focusing on like what you're eating and the food part of it, and got more curious about like, okay, I'm eating this, but how am I feeling? And what is my being like? And what is my energy like? And it sounds like that kind of brought you to this space of like mindfulness, essentially, where you like discovered more about yourself. And I think that's so important for like even having my younger self in mind. Like I've been obsessed with nutrition since I was maybe like 14, but it was definitely like it was just that and exercise, and there was like complete ignoring of like how I was feeling and like what emotions I was carrying around. Like that didn't come until I was in college. So it's very, I think it's so important to like just repeat that it's more than just what you eat, that you're more than what you eat, you're more than the like physical side. There's like an emotional and energetic to human beings as well, and it all needs to be nourished, you know. And food is just one of the many ways we can nourish ourselves.
Exactly. And I think we often use it as a like, we view our bodies because that's what we've been modeled often as things to control and fix and manage. And we do that all cognitively. And when we can actually be in our bodies and be like, recognizing how emotions show up in our bodies, recognizing how different meals make us feel, or you know, that side of things, like the everyday side of like how we eat and when we eat and how we actually feel as a result of food, and how we actually feel as a result of not sleeping, or how certain exercises make us feel, having that kind of awareness. And then also exactly as you say, like the emotional, how that's playing into everything as well, knowing that they impact each other too. And just things like, you know, the whole anger side. For me, for so long I was like the good little girl who was just kind and lovely, and like anger isn't something our society is like, sure, you know, go be angry. And it's knowing too that like anger's, all those kind of bigger scary emotions can be, we get scared of them because we're like, oh, how are they going to present, but they can be channeled in a way where, you know, you're not putting other people in danger or harming anyone else, obviously.
Especially when it's like childhood rage and now you're like an adult and you can hold a safe, intentional space for you to express that. Like you could lock yourself in your bedroom, get some pillows to punch and like
screaming too.
do some screaming, and and like that definitely can be a channel for change. And like I always feel like after an emotional and also like embodiment practice of like how we're feeling, I feel like after that it kind of leaves us clear to like intuitively receive what the next step is, or even like intuitively receive some sort of like wisdom, you know, like
completely, because it's clearing that space, so we're no longer like obsessing or taking up energy, and in that it's like, okay, here's a new canvas, or keep painting on this one that just looks more beautiful, or whatever.
And also since we just mentioned like bringing in other elements of how they can support us, I also want to bring up the fact that you're not on social media, and seeing like how that's like helped your symptoms, and like how you came to that conclusion, and like how that's had a difference on your life. And oh my God, I feel like I'm asking so many questions at once, but also like how you run your business without having social media.
Cool. So I had it, I don't know, whenever we all got it. And nearly more than a decade ago now, right? And with Instagram in particular, I was just had a personal account and a business account, and the personal account I was just using again from that place of like, let me prove, and which I know a lot of us do, and I know that's a lot of what social media is about, but it was really that like continuous let me prove that then like from a business perspective, I just would constrict every time even though a lot of what I was saying was fucking amazing, I would still just like compare and shrink and be like, I will see someone else saying that and be like, oh, well, that's exactly what I know and I do. And so it was just a lot of like playing small. And I was in a stage in my life as well where there was a lot of shedding that needed to happen. And that was keeping me, or not allowing me to shed as fully as I was needing to. And yeah, I think with the personal account, I just made that decision. I was like, well, let's just see. I'll do it for a month and then just see. And I just felt so good not being on there. And then with the business account, I recognized I was like, I know this is a beautiful tool. I know it's a really, really powerful tool and it has that ability. But for me right now, I'm feeling like I need to do, 4 hours of meditating and like intense, I don't know, get the biggest crystal I could find, whatever, before I went onto social media. And I was like, this just doesn't make sense. And I am not enjoying it. So let me lean into what I am actually enjoying. And I think, there can be elements there where people are like, oh, well, are you just avoid like the fear side of things, like, moving out of your comfort zone and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, yes, that has its place. But right now, like moving out of my comfort zone in social media does not feel like what I need to be doing. But there are other places I can be moving out of my comfort zone. So I just recognized, actually, I really like my website was how most of my clients were coming through. All of them pretty much at that point. So they're finding me all on Google, which I would know from their discovery call questionnaires. So then I love doing email. So I was like, well, let's just roll with that and see where we go and how what comes from there. And so this was a couple of years ago. I think I stopped posting, and clients just kept finding me and kept coming. And like, I know that
all through the internet, like through Google.
Yeah, all through Google.
Blog?
It was unusual, to be honest. It's not like I wouldn't be a business coach being like, do this, because it wasn't. I don't think it's normal. But I think it was like, it was a gift to me to know that I would, like, in honoring my own needs, I would be supported throughout. And that's exactly what happened. And so I had a couple of years of just being fully booked, without being on social media and without being that active in other ways. And then that shifted, but that's again been an invitation into creating new offerings and really stepping into what's fully lighting me up and shedding those last layers of, I've got to do things this way because that will make me worthy. Yeah. Does that answer enough questions?
Yeah, I'm also curious. How do you like get leads or like grow or make sure? I don't want to say make sure because that sounds like manipulative. How do you attract new clients to your business? That's the question. How do you attract new clients to your business?
It's largely been through email last year. That's again shifted a bit now, but it will come back to that.
But email, like these are people already on your email list, or you're sending?
No, they would. So I think my website just functions quite well if certain terms are searched. So I've got someone who helps me. So like SEO stuff, I'm guessing.
Okay, I gotcha.
So not that much goes into that, to be honest, but I feature quite high with SEO. So people come across my website with quite a lot of ease. And then on there, there's a freebie that they then sign up for.
Okay,
Which
and then
is
that
being
brings them
updated.
to your email
And then that's
list.
into
Okay,
yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah, so it's that, and like I'm not after, and I think that's what's so important for all of us in business, is like, I'm not after, for me personally right now, I'm not after thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of people. So I'm not after creating this cohesive audience. I'm more knowing, because the business model previously was what just one-to-one support. So that's all I would offer. I would only need a small number of clients to come in order for me to be functioning as I wanted to business-wise. That is shifting now. New ways of like reviewing lead magnets and being on podcasts and various other things that are going to be helpful and supportive for that. But for then, it wasn't like, it was so freeing for me to just recognize, okay, this is what I want and this is where I currently am now, and this is what I need to do that, rather than like have the blog, have the podcast, have the emails, have the social media, when that wasn't actually true for what I needed and allowing my business to really thrive. Because it was like I was hitting, and I know it's not all about numbers, but I was, what is it, five-figure months pretty consistently throughout. So it was possible. And I think, again, like, it was honoring, like, just channeling energy where was most true for me to show up as fully as I wanted to serve clients.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. That's very, very helpful. I think it's always very helpful when we can simplify what we're doing, because online there's so much noise of like, start a Facebook group, do this, do that, be on Pinterest, be everywhere. And it's just not,
I don't even,
I don't have TikTok. Oh my gosh.
No,
I had one, but the platform is so addictive. There was one day where I spent like 4 or 5 hours in a row on TikTok. And then I was like, I am deleting this right now. And I deleted my account, deleted the app, and I've never been on it since.
Yeah. And I think it's also for ourselves, we can, again, like, I remember getting so frustrated and so judgy towards myself when I was like, I've just been on these things for 100 years. And that we know, that's what they're designed for. So like, we can sometimes, if we are in states where because that's what I kept recognizing, like, there were sometimes days where I could go on and be totally fine and be like, okay, these are all nourishing and these are accounts I would look at and blah, blah. And then other days where I wasn't, like, I was tired, I didn't sleep well, so there was higher stress or whatever. And I'd have a completely different approach to that, or like a different experience of that. And so again, like, just giving myself grace and kindness and compassion for, okay, you're tired, and also this thing is made to make you stay here for as long as you possibly can. So both of those combined aren't really the most supportive, nourishing options,
So for anyone who has been listening, who's curious about working with you, what are you currently offering? And where can they find you?
So website is the best place, and then that'll take you straight to the email list. So the business I've got is Marula, so Marula wellness.com.
I'll put that in the show notes.
Cool. Marula is a fruit from Southern African trees, and it's a really, really, like, highly nutritious fruit. And there's a whole linking to being rooted where I'm from and nourished from that. So that's what Marula is about.
That's beautiful.
And so I love it. And so that Marula Wellness is my website. And in terms of offerings at the moment, there's going to be literally within the next 3 to 4 weeks, these offerings are going to be birthed. So I'm still doing one-to-one. So I'm shifting from the current offering to a new one called chocolate mousse. And that's essentially really giving significant space to be in relationship with our bodies first. So I meet you where you at in what you're like, letting you be honest of what that looks like, and helping unpack that, and helping bring in ritual and ceremony and practices that can help you move through that, and help you really be in that place of reverence, respect, and love towards your body. So placing your body front and center so that any changes we make going forward with regards to food and lifestyle are from that place and are anchored in that place, and not from that place of, let's just make this all stop as fast as possible. So that's chocolate mousse.
I love the name.
Yeah, it excites me so much. And then the more group experience, or DIY rather, it will be group initially, and then move into DIY, and that's called Blooming Gold. And that's just focusing on the body relationship side of things to begin with. In time, what will happen is I'll provide guidance with food and lifestyle, but everyone will start with Blooming Gold, which is, yeah, exactly what I say, body relationship, and giving you tools and a bit of a framework to, you know, because it's one thing to be like, oh, be in relationship with your body and have this trusting, respectful, reverent relationship, but what does that actually look like? Just giving framework where there's flexibility within that for you to create what that means for you. Yeah. So awesome. that's that. And then email will be the main form of communication for that. In time, there will also be a podcast, but that will be in time. Yeah.
I also have a few questions that I like to ask at the end of every episode.
Cool. Yeah.
So the first one is, what does self-love mean to you?
Oh, self-love. It means, for me, it's an action. So it's giving, it's knowing in your body what that looks like and feels like for me. And so for us as individuals, like what's that definition, and what's most true for me, and how can I act on that? So it's not just the inner work, it's like, what does that look like outwardly as well?
And then finish this phrase, the way to my heart is.
I'm just looking now. Superficially is flowers and chocolates. Definitely. And candles, another biggie there.
Oh, I love candles.
Yeah. And emotionally, it's letting me be witnessed.
Love that. And then, when do you feel most alive?
Strangely, the thing that just came through was like waterfalls, which is bizarre to me, because I'm not the biggest fan of water in that sense. But yeah, I as you asked that, I was taken back to a recent trip in Italy where we were at some hot springs, and there are these beautiful cascading natural hot springs, and I was just sitting under one of them, like one of the cascading bits, just being massaged by the water. And that memory came up, so we're going with that.
That sounds wonderful. As you were saying it, I was like picturing it in my mind.
It was amazing. Yeah.
Also,
sorry, I was going to say we went at sunrise and at full moon, because it was that same night. So it was just
wow.
Yeah.
I was just going to say there's a lot of energy in waterfalls too. So there's like that aliveness within the water. Okay, last question. What is your favorite part about being a woman?
There's so much, but I think, the two things are like my women heart connection, and like that fullness of like leaning into really being led by our hearts. I know this is available to anyone, but that for me as a woman and my womb. And with my womb, I mean, there's so many elements there, but the picture I'm getting, my ovaries are just covered in flowers and releasing seeds, and into the womb space is just this, gorgeous garden. And whether that gets, whatever that looks like, whether that seed gets fertilized or not, just the aliveness of that.
I have a friend who posted a picture of her baby once, and she put in the caption, like, "This is my womb fruit."
So cool.
What you said made me think of that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Lara. This was a beautiful conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really, really grateful for your time and just your invitation. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Openly Spoken. I know that there's an abundance of content online, so I really appreciate you giving me your ears today. If this episode shifted something for you, please share this with a friend or write us a podcast review if you're listening to this on iTunes so that more people can find this. If anything shifted for you from this episode that you want to have a conversation about, I would love to hear from you. Just send me a DM over on Instagram at selfexpressbabe, and that is in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.